Welcome to part 2 of my soap making video. Let's get cracking. Welcome back. The reason why we had a break for a cup of tea is because that gives us about the right amount of time to allow our sodium hydroxide mix, or lye as it's often called, to get to about the same temperature as our oils in the pan. We heated these up in our pan and the oils got nice and hot, and we've left them off the heat so they're starting to cool down. With our mixture over here, we used cold water and our sodium hydroxide crystals, but when they're mixed together they get very, very hot very quickly, but these are now cooling down as well. Now when you're making soap, some people tell you to get thermometers and try and get the temperature exactly the same, around about sort of 35 to 37 degrees centigrade for the two before you mix them together. I've been making soap for several years. I've made hundreds of batches of soap. I've never had one go wrong by doing the method that we've just done today. That's mixing these together, going and having a cup of tea for about 5 minutes, even a biscuit if you like, coming back, mixing them together. They're absolutely fine. So if you've got thermometers, use them. If you haven't, don't panic. You won't have any problems, I promise you. Now we're going to mix together our sodium hydroxide and our oils. We're going to pour them together into the same pan, and we're going to pour our sodium hydroxide into the steel pan that our oils are in. Once they're together in a pan, we're going to get one of these blenders, not with the whisk, with the proper blender attachment. That's going to go into the solution to help us mix it all together. Now, because we're going to be touching our sodium hydroxide solution, we need to make sure we're putting our face mask back on and our safety goggles on, because we don't want to get any splashes into our face. So I'm going to pop my glasses on, pop my mask on. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me still. I can still breathe, that's good. Now, very importantly, we're going to take our oils to our sodium hydroxide, not the other way around. And that's because we want to minimise the amount of time that we're moving that solution around, because it's pH 14, it's pure alkaline, and if it does get onto your skin, it will burn you. So we're going to get our pan, move that across here. Now, because it's been cooling down, I can actually touch the bottom of that. That was on the gas, but it's actually not that hot now. But I don't really want to burn my work surface at all, so I'm going to use this cover that I had over the sodium hydroxide to rest this on, but I'm not just going to put that straight on the top. I'll move that off. When I do take that off, the fumes that are in that container are going to start coming out. So I want to make sure that I put that liquid into here fairly quickly. Be careful when you're doing it, you don't want to splash it anywhere. I'll put this cover on here, I'll put the oil down, pour my mixture into the pan, and then I'm going to move the bowl over to the sink, pop it in, and then just very gently start running cold water in before turning it on fuller so that we can wash that bowl out. We want to get rid of the sodium hydroxide in that bowl. Probably won't talk while I'm doing this, so I've told you what I'm going to do in advance. So mask on, take this off, gently pour our solution in, into the sink, gently turn the water on. We don't want any splashes. And then once we're happy, turn that on more fully. I'm confident now that's not going to splash. We'll let that run just a little bit, just to help start washing it out. I'll just turn the water off. Now, back here in our pan, if you have a look inside, now that the mixtures are together, you shouldn't really get any fumes coming out. This is just initially what it looks like when you pour the sodium hydroxide solution into your oils. It's starting to go a little bit sort of cloudy. Now you can mix this together by hand with a whisk if you want to, but you'll be whisking for a long time. And depending on what oils you use, the amount of time that you're whisking for can vary. And what you're actually doing is you're whisking those together so they start to set and form our soap. Now, I don't know if you have ever made cakes before, but sometimes when you're making a cake mixture and or if you're whisking up something like cream, and as you're whisking it gets thicker and thicker, you're trying to get something that's called trace. And what that is if you've got a solution and you pull some of it out on a spoon and drip it back onto what's left in the pan, rather than it just going in and straight away dissipating into the solution, it leaves a little trail on the top before it dissipates back in. And that's called trace. And that's what we're going to try and achieve with our soap mixture in here. Now, as I said, we're going to use one of these electric blenders. Now, some very important things to remember when you're using one of these with our soap mixture. I'm going to plug it in and I'm going to turn it on. But before I put this in the mixture, even if this is something that I've used before, I'm just going to, on the lowest setting, give it a quick pulse. And that's just to remind myself how powerful this is. The reason why I do this is because I don't want to put that into my mixture and start it up and then be shocked by it and move it around, because on the bottom of this it's got little holes in here, and that's to help the solution that you're mixing together to move around when you're mixing it together. But because this is spinning around very fast, it can actually shoot out of one of these holes. If you're taken by surprise and tilt this in your solution, you might get a jet of this firing out of the top of the pan and going all over you or all over your house. And at the moment it's still going to be very alkaline. We've just poured pure pH 14 alkaline into there, and that will still burn you if you touch it. So we have to be very careful. So always just check by giving a quick pulse first. The next very important thing to remember with this is never start this until it's completely into the pan. So don't start whisking as you lower it in, because again you'll get jets of liquid coming out the side of this thing, and then we don't want that to happen. Equally, before you pull it out of the liquid, make sure that you're not still rotating the spinner on the bottom, because again you'll get soap flying everywhere. So the thing to do is to pop this in, and what I like to do first is just start giving it a little stir by hand. I'm going to pop my mask back on a second because I just want to make sure I'm protected. And then we're just going to give it a little pulse, just a quick little pulse, just to make sure it's okay. Yeah, and that's firing up a little bit because there's not much in this pan, but because of the high sides we should be okay. I'm actually going to tilt that a little bit because it's quite... Now, what you're going to see when you do this is the mixture starts going cloudy like custard. I'm going to keep doing that till I get to trace. Once I get to trace, we'll come back and have a look. So once you've been mixing your soap mixture together for possibly several minutes or so, you'll find that it goes like this. It starts to go quite thick and creamy like custard, and it looks like custard. And when you pull it out of the mixture and just dribble it back onto the surface, you probably can't pick this up on the camera, but it will start to just leave a little trace on the top. And that's what we're looking for with our mixture. What we don't want to do is mix it until it gets too firm, because then what will happen is when we put it into the mould, you might then get stuck getting air bubbles in your soap. So we don't want that to happen. I teach classes, I teach people how to make soap in classes, and I have had the odd student where they've mixed it for so long that it's almost gone completely firm in the pan, and we've had a terrible time getting it into the mould. Can still be done if you get to that stage, but try and just leave it when it just gets still quite runny like this, and that's when you know your soap is ready to go into the mould. Now, what I found when I was doing this, actually, and I will show you just quickly if you come over, I normally make bigger batches than this in a pan this size, and the soap might be up to sort of this sort of level, and I'll have no trouble at all putting this into my soap mixture and then just letting it whisk away for a few minutes. And as I'm whisking, what I'll tend to do is, rather than leave this in one place, I'll move this around to help stir the solution together. But because there's not that much in here, I've actually had to tilt the pan, and I've tilted it away from myself. Try and keep this level. It's in our mixture, but I've had to just pulse it. So literally just go. So don't panic if you find that you have to do that. It'll take a little bit longer for you to get the mixture to that consistency, but just persevere and you will get it. I'm happy with the mixture at that consistency. I'm going to turn this off at the plug socket. Just take this off. Give it a little tap to try and get as much of the mixture off. And then just pop that into some water. Once you're at this stage, you literally can pour this into the mould if you wish, and you'll just get really lovely creamy soap, but with no smell and no colour. It will come out that colour. At this stage you can now, if you wish, add things like essential oils if you want to give your soap an aroma. You can add colours to your soap. We're going to put it into our mould. We're going to cover it up, and I'll show you this in a moment, and then we're going to wrap this in a towel and we're going to leave it to set for 24 hours. After 24 hours we'll come back and I'll do another video to show you what happens. We'll take it out of the mould and it'll be a firm lump of soap. It'll still be quite soft, and that's the point where we can cut it into bars if we want to. That's the best time to cut it into bars, when it's still fairly soft but it is set. We then have to do what we call curing the soap. We have to let it rest for about 4 to 6 weeks. That lets the sodium hydroxide that's in the soap react with our oils, and it turns just into a nice creamy bar of soap with no sodium hydroxide left in it whatsoever. So at that point it's safe to use. So finally we want to pour our soap mixture into our mould. Now we lined this earlier, so we don't have to worry about doing it now. Pop the lid off. Pop this down on the counter. Now, you can, if you want to, you can try and get this as nice and flat as you can, if you wish, but I quite like it a little bit crinkly, so that when this actually comes out of the mould, and again we'll show you what happens when we take it out of a mould in 24 hours, you've got some little crinkly bits around the edge. I like it, it's a nice homemade feel. But it's entirely up to you, and literally all we're going to do is try and get as much of this in this mould as we can. Now this is where having it slightly still runny works to your advantage, because this will literally just start pouring in. If that was a lot firmer in the pan, I'd have a tougher job getting this into the mould. Now this is where you kind of wish your pan was a little bit lighter, because you need to scrape that into the mould. Try and get in as much as you can. One, so that you've got better, bigger bars of soap, and two, so it cuts down on the washing up. So we'll pop all that in there. Once we're happy that it's in, we'll put it as much as we can. You can flatten this down if you want to, and again, being slightly runnier, it's a lot easier just to make sure that that's nice and level on the top. If that was firmer, you'll have to press it down a bit harder. What you can also do is, just to make sure there aren't any air bubbles in there, just give it a little tap on the counter. That encourages any air that is trapped in there to rise up to the surface. Now, what you can do here as well is, if you want to, is put flower petals on the top, or anything that you want to put on the top of your soap. You can just put that onto the top now, and then I like to just wrap these over. Make sure it's all nice and sealed inside. Pop our lid on. Oh, the right way round if we can. Pop our lid on nice and tight. Finally, we put our lid on, wrap it in a towel, and put it to bed for 24 hours. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel. Join me in my next soap making video, when we'll take our soap out of the mould and I'll show you what to do next. Until then, take care.